The United States of America is not a country you'd be happy to see in a round where you need big points. Yes, it's massive, and on top of that, it could always be Canada, right? Even if you're sure it's the US, a state like Oregon can very easily look like the Northeast. And if you get it wrong, it's as bad as guessing in the Volga Oblast in Russia when it's actually the UK. So in this video, we're going to look at how we can tell it's not Canada, what the regions of the US look like, and then some state or region-specific infrastructure, in other words, metas. Alright, let's first quickly look at what's unique, or at least common, in the US, and how we can tell it's not Canada. The US uses the imperial system when measuring speed, so you will see miles on signs instead of kilometers. And pay attention to the way the word center is spelt here. Canada uses British English spelling, so the word center would be spelt this way in Canada. The US uses the phrase speed limit on their speed signs. Canada uses maximum. This triangular yellow sign with the phrase no passing zone is unique to the US, and you might hear it being referred to as the Doritos sign. This yield sign is also unique to the US. Canada has a similar one, but it doesn't have words on it. In the US, road signs tend to have more words in general compared to Canada. This rectangular junction sign with a single or double arrow is found in the US. Canada uses diamond-shaped junction signs. The US uses yellow middle lines and white outer lines. Double middle lines are the most common. It is not uncommon in Canada though, so never guess solely based on this. These water towers are very common and sometimes have the name of the town or state on them. The US is a relatively religious country and Baptist churches are very common all over. Not common in Canada. If you care to study and memorize, here are a few of the gas stations, convenience stores, and restaurant chains that operate in the United States, but not in Canada. It should be noted that Chick-fil-A makes a few appearances in Toronto. Alright, now that we can tell when it's the US, how do we get more accurate? How do we region guess? The first step of perfecting your region guessing in any country is getting familiar with the landscape, the terrain, and the architecture. Let's take a look at the main regions of the US. The Northeast. With the Appalachian Mountain Range, at a fairly low altitude, a densely forested mountain range, a rural Northeast round, can very easily look like Central Europe, or sometimes even look like the Baltics or Russia. In case of suburban and urban rounds, architecture comes to play. Older three-story wooden houses, also called stacked triplexes, are very common in the Northeast. In densely populated areas like New York City, brownstone buildings are very common. The Central Lowlands, famous in the community for its large cornfields and soybean crops. The suburban architecture is pretty generic with wooden or stone 1 to 2-story houses. Densely populated residential areas tend to look more modern than the Northeast. The coastal plains are most recognizable by the southern pine with features like tall, thin, and its distinct-looking pine needles. They are all over the region. Houses are generally 1 story tall, but a lot bigger in surface area. In the suburbs of big cities, it is common to see 2 or 3 wooden stories on top of a stone ground level story. Commercial buildings with red metal roofs are also common. The Great Plains are in the middle of the United States and stretch from the Canadian border in the north to central Texas in the south. The whole region is mainly treeless, but pretty green with its massive grasslands. To my knowledge, this region does not have any distinct architectural features. If it does, let me know in the comments. The Rocky Mountains often feature many pine trees and visible snow all year round at the highest peaks. As you move southwards, it gets noticeably dry. Rural architecture often features lots of dark wooden boards and timbers. West Texas and the Southwest. When towns start to look like they were made in cities' skylines, consider this region. Noteworthy architecture includes Pueblo Revival-style houses. They are commonly seen in New Mexico. They are typically constructed of adobe or brick and concrete. They have rounded edges and flat roofs and are usually sand brown in color. In the Great Basin, you will often find yourself in a desert-looking area on a long, straight road with tall mountains in the distance. The Cascade Range. If you know you're in the US but the landscape looks like Slovenia, you're in the Cascade Range in northwest US. Although they're not completely unique to the region, this specific conifer tree, recognizable by its height and dark color, is really common in Washington and Oregon. Central Valley in California has a Mediterranean climate, and with the Spanish colonial revival architecture, suburban houses commonly being white, sometimes you might get a Spanish, Southern Italian, Greek, or Western Turkish feel. Now let's take a step back and look at the whole country. You must engrave these 3 maps in your mind. The topography. As we mentioned, we have the Appalachians, the coastal plains, central lowlands, the Great Plains in the middle, the Rockies, the Cascades, and the Great Basin in between. The climate. If you're not familiar with Köppen climate classifications, here's a Köppen climate map of Europe. If it doesn't help, pause the video and compare this map to a Köppen map of your country or any region you're more familiar with. The soil. Pay attention to the areas that have reddish soil. Now that we have a general feel for how the regions look, it's time to get to the nitty-gritty. In the lower ranks, you probably won't need these next 3 maps, but if you're aiming high, they are essential. Speed limits. Speed limits can be super useful when combined with other clues. Highway shields. As you can see, most states have unique designs. Some have the state's outline on them. Some straight up have the state's name. A special warning, do not confuse Louisiana with California just because it says LA on the sign. I've seen it happen. License plates. There are a few license plates that are easy to remember, like New Mexico's red on yellow and yellow on turquoise, or California and Delaware's yellow on black. The states that are colored green are states that don't require vehicles to have front plates, which is definitely something to look out for. Although, I should include a warning, never guess off of one car. And here are the state flags. I promise you they pop up all the time, so it will help to at least learn a few of the major ones. And for the last section, here are some state or region-specific infrastructure. This brown bollard with a white rectangle on the front and 2 smaller white or silver squares on the back is unique to Washington. Utility poles in California usually have markings at the bottom of the pole that consist of 3 yellow stripes. If you see a speed limit sign with just the word speed on it, you're in Oregon. This bollard with a dark metal post with a white diamond on each side of the top is most common in South Dakota and Montana. This bollard with a reflector on a thin stick is unique to Nevada. This bollard with a dark metal pole and a white circular reflector at the top is unique to Wyoming. Concrete paving on main highways is much more common in Iowa than in other states. Wisconsin and Missouri are the only 2 states that use a lettering system. These white reflectors on signposts are unique to Kansas. They are most commonly seen on stop signs in rural areas. In Minnesota, these yellow signs with vertical, black triangles are placed before bridges at most major river crossings and at the beginnings and ends of guardrail sections on large highways. On most rural stop signposts in Minnesota, a black and white marker is attached to the posts horizontally. These green ATV route signs are unique to Wisconsin. A rectangular white metal plate with an orange rectangle and diamond can be seen on most poles in Wisconsin and the Michigan Peninsula. These simple white bollards with black reflectors are unique to Wisconsin. Road signs attached to 2 signposts are most common in Michigan. Also not unique but most common in Michigan, stoplights and signs that hang from wires on intersections. If you see a fucking math problem on a street sign, you're in West Virginia. In Oklahoma, you can often find a green rectangular sign with 3 rows of numbers attached to the back of stop signs at rural intersections. Not infrastructure, but for some reason, buildings with very large sloped roofs are most common in the states of Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana. And finally, black street signs with white text are unique to South Carolina.